Before we descend into the shadows of Tehran and the silent corridors where history is altered by the pull of a trigger, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. These stories exist in the margins of official records, and your support ensures we can continue to bring these classified files into the light. The date was November 14, 2011. The location was a nondescript, heavily fortified compound nestled in the Alborz Mountains, just 40 kilometers north of Tehran. To the casual observer, or even to a standard satellite sweep, the facility appeared to be a geological research center, a remnant of the Shah's era infrastructure that had been repurposed for civil engineering. There were no visible surface-to-air missile batteries, no excessive perimeter patrols, and no flags bearing the insignia of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This anonymity was its primary defense. However, inside the subterranean levels of the facility, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the weight of imminent conflict. Gathered around a mahogany table were 6 men who did not officially exist in the public hierarchy of the Iranian military. They were known within the intelligence community as the Syndicate. These were not the faces you saw on television shouting slogans. These were the architects of shadow warfare. They controlled the logistics of missile shipments to Lebanon, the financing of sleeper cells in South America, and the advanced enrichment programs that the West feared most. General Qasem Vahidi, the head of the ballistic missile program, Colonel Reza Farhadi, the liaison to Hezbollah's heavy weapons division, Dr. Amir Tehrani, the chief nuclear physicist coordinating covert centrifuge operations, and 3 regional commanders responsible for the Quds Force's external operations in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. They had never been in the same room at the same time. The protocol of compartmentalization, the cardinal rule of intelligence that keeps cells separate to prevent a single leak from sinking the ship, had been suspended. Why? Because they were planning something that required absolute synchronization. A coordinated, multi-front offensive designed to overwhelm the Iron Dome and reshape the Middle East in 48 hours. They believed their meeting was secret. They believed the mountains protected them. They believed that no intelligence service on Earth could track all 6 of them to a single coordinate without tipping its hand. They were wrong. 5,000 miles away, in a windowless room in Tel Aviv, the operational tempo was shifting from monitoring to active execution. The Mossad had not just found the location. They had anticipated it. For 6 months, a specialized unit, separate from the standard command structure and operating under the direct authority of the Prime Minister's office, had been tracking the digital exhaust of these 6 men. They didn't look for the men themselves. They looked for the silence. When 6 distinct high-volume communication nodes all went dark simultaneously, and travel patterns shifted toward the northern mountains, the pattern was undeniable. The unit, known only by the codename Keshet, Rainbow, was not a large military battalion. It was a small surgical team of 12 operatives. They were not there to start a war. They were there to stop one before it began. The objective was clear but terrifying in its scope. Eliminate the command structure of the upcoming offensive in a single window of opportunity. Not one by one over months, which would send the others into hiding, but all 6, in one night, in one room. The audacity of the mission was its camouflage. The Iranians would never expect an adversary to be so reckless as to attempt to strike deep inside sovereign territory against a target of this magnitude. It was deemed impossible by risk analysts. But in the world of covert operations, the impossible is simply a variable that requires more precise mathematics. As the sun dipped below the jagged peaks of the Alborz, the operation commenced. The 6 commanders sat down for tea, believing they were the masters of the board. They did not know that the pieces had already been moved against them. The path to the Alborz compound did not begin with a satellite photo or a human source on the ground. It began with a fluctuation in the price of specialized concrete in the Tehran commodities market. 6 months prior, Unit 8200, Israel's Signal Intelligence Corps, flagged a series of anomalies. A shell company, previously associated with agricultural imports, had begun purchasing high-grade, reinforced cabling and blast-proof ventilation systems. The delivery address was a warehousing district that, according to geological surveys, was solid rock. This was the first thread. The investigation was handed over to Mossad's research division. Analysts spent weeks peeling back the layers of shell companies. they discovered that the procurement officer for this shell company was the brother-in-law of General Vahidi's chief of staff. It was a classic mistake, nepotism creating a vulnerability in operational security. But knowing where supplies were going was not the same as knowing who would be there. The breakthrough came from a piece of malware planted years earlier, not in a computer, but in the diagnostic software of a luxury sedan. Colonel Reza Farhadi drove a German import, procured through sanctions-evading channels in Dubai. The car's onboard computer, responsible for engine timing and GPS navigation, had been infected with a dormant sleeper program during its transit through the Gulf. For 2 years, the malware did nothing. It sent no signals, recorded no audio. It simply waited for a specific trigger, a geographic coordinate that matched a list of black sites suspected by Israeli intelligence. When Farhadi's car turned onto the unpaved service road leading into the Alborz Mountains, the malware woke up. It sent a single, compressed burst of data, a heartbeat, via a commercial satellite uplink used for trucking logistics. The signal was intercepted in Tel Aviv. It was weak, buried in static, but it was enough. The location was confirmed. But then, a second signal appeared, then a third. Not from cars, but from personal devices that had supposedly been left behind. Dr. Tehrani, the physicist, was a man of habit. He carried an old digital watch, a gift from his father. He believed it was purely mechanical, unconnected to the digital grid. He was unaware that the battery had been swapped during a repair service in Vienna 3 years prior. The new battery contained a passive RFID receiver that acted as a homing beacon when subjected to a specific radio frequency. Mossad analysts watched as the stars aligned on their digital map. 6 distinct signatures, all converging on the isolated compound. The probability of a coincidence was calculated at 0. This was a summit. The intelligence director, a man known for his caution, looked at the data and realized the gravity of the situation. If these 6 men were meeting, the timeline for the Iranian offensive was not months away. It was imminent. The syndicate only gathered to give the final green light. The decision-making process in Israel is usually laborious, involving legal counsel, military strategy, and political approval. In this case, the process was accelerated. The Prime Minister was woken at 3 a.m. The briefing lasted 20 minutes. The question was not, can we do this, but what happens if we don't? The assessment was stark. If the meeting concluded and the commanders dispersed, the orders for the multi-front attack would be disseminated, and war would be inevitable. The approval was given. Operation Obsidian Night was activated. The objective was total neutralization. There could be no survivors in that room, and more importantly, no evidence of who had executed the strike until the team was safely out of the country. The mission required a team already in place, deep cover operatives who had been living the legend, their false identities, for years, waiting for a call they hoped would never come. The operatives of the Keshet unit were not living in barracks in Tel Aviv. They were embedded in the fabric of Iranian society. They were the shopkeepers, the students, the engineers, and the truck drivers who made up the daily rhythm of Tehran. Avner, the team leader, lived in Tehran under the alias of Karim, a freelance structural engineer. He had spent 4 years building his cover, attending local mosques, complaining about inflation to his neighbors, and even playing chess in the park with retired civil servants. He was trusted. He was invisible. When the coded message came through, a specific sequence of songs played on a European radio station he listened to, he knew his life as Karim was over. He walked into his apartment, pulled up the loose floorboard in his pantry, and retrieved a hardened case. Inside was not a rifle, but a secure communications terminal and a set of coordinates. He burned his family photos of a family that didn't exist, hired actors he had posed with years ago, and packed a single bag. Across the city, Yael, known to her neighbors as Samira, a French-language tutor, received her activation signal via a wrong number text message. She was the team's surveillance and electronics specialist. Her students knew her as a quiet, intellectual woman. They did not know she could bypass a military-grade firewall in under 3 minutes or that she was an expert marksman. The team converged not at a safe house, but at a construction site on the outskirts of the city. There were 6 of them in the primary strike team, with another 6 providing logistical support and extraction. They were a mix of specialized talents: combat, demolition, cyber warfare, and linguistics. They spoke Farsi with local dialects so perfect that even under interrogation, their accents wouldn't betray them. They met in the back of a heavy transport truck carrying industrial piping. The reunion was silent. There were no handshakes, no sentimental speeches. They were professionals transitioning from deep cover to active combat status. Avner briefed them. The target is the Alborz facility. We have 6 high-value targets, HVTs. The window is tonight. The facility has a localized security grid, meaning no internet connection. We have to go in physically to shut down the alarms. The perimeter is guarded by the Ansar al-Mahdi Protection Corps. These are not conscripts. They are elite personal security details. If we are detected before the breach, the mission fails. If we leave evidence behind, the extraction fails. The team reviewed the schematics of the compound provided by the architectural intelligence gathered earlier. It was a fortress built into the rock face. There was one main entrance and several ventilation shafts. The main entrance was a kill zone. The ventilation shafts were alarmed. "We're not going in through the door," Avner said, pointing to a sheer cliff face on the holographic map projected from his device. "We're coming down from the top. The mountain is the blind spot. Their radar looks out, not up at the vertical rock face." It was a mountaineering nightmare. They would have to scale down a freezing wind-swept cliff in total darkness, carrying combat gear without using powered winches that might create a heat signature or noise. It was physical suicide for anyone but the most elite athletes. For Cachette, it was just Tuesday. As the truck rumbled toward the northern highways, the team began the ritual of sterilization. They removed every item that linked them to their cover identities. Keys to apartments were melted down, ID cards were shredded. They became ghosts. From this point forward, if they were caught, they were mercenaries with no nationality, no name, and no government that would claim them. The truck dropped them off 5 miles from the target area at a trailhead used by goat herders. The air was thin and biting cold. Snow had begun to fall, a blessing and a curse. It would mask their footprints and dampen the sound of their movement, but it would also drop the temperature to dangerous levels. They moved in a single file, using night vision goggles that amplified the ambient starlight. Silence was absolute. They communicated with hand signals and bone conduction headsets that transmitted vibrations through the jawbone, allowing them to whisper without making a sound audible to anyone standing 3 feet away. The climb to the ridge overlooking the compound took 4 hours. It was grueling. Lungs burned in the thin air, muscles screamed under the weight of equipment, but their discipline held. When they reached the summit, they looked down. The compound was a glowing scar in the darkness. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter fence. Patrol dogs roamed the space between the outer wall and the main building. Guards stood in heated booths, their breath steaming in the cold. Yael set up her equipment on the ridge. She pulled out a device that looked like a long-range camera lens. It was a laser microphone, capable of reading the vibrations of glass windows from a mile away to reconstruct the audio inside. She aimed it at the main conference room windows, which were visible only because of a slight design flaw. They faced the cliff for the view, assuming the cliff was inaccessible. "I have audio," Yael whispered. Voices confirmed. "I distinguish 6 distinct patterns." She fed the audio into a voice recognition algorithm. The system matched the voice prints. Vahidi, Farhadi, Tehrani. The gang was all there. "They are discussing the timeline," Yael reported. "They are moving the schedule up. They want to initiate the first strikes in 48 hours. Avner looked at his watch. It was 01 Braz. The commanders would likely break for sleep soon, dispersing to secure wings of the facility. If they separated, the mission became infinitely harder. They had to strike while the meeting was still in session. "We go now," Avner signaled. The descent began. They rappelled down the cliff face, 200 meters of vertical drop. They moved like spiders, synchronized and fluid. As they reached the ground level behind the main building, they were in the shadow of the structure itself, hidden from the perimeter towers. But there was a problem. A new sensor array had been installed, one that intelligence hadn't predicted. It was a seismic ground sensor system. If they stepped on the gravel surrounding the building, the pressure would trigger an alarm. The team froze. They were 10 meters from the wall, suspended on their ropes a few feet off the ground. Avner scanned the area. He saw a generator unit humming nearby. The vibration of the generator was masking the seismic sensors in its immediate vicinity. "Follow the vibration line," Avner signaled. They had to swing from their ropes, landing precisely on the concrete pad of the generator, balancing on a surface no wider than a sidewalk, right under the nose of the enemy. One slip, one boot touching the gravel, and the night would light up with tracer fire. While the strike team navigated the physical defenses, the cyber warfare element of the operation was engaging in a silent duel. From a remote location, likely a satellite uplink in a neighboring country, Mossad's cyber unit, Unit 8200, was attacking the facility's internal network. The compound was air-gapped, disconnected from the internet, but air gaps are not magical shields. They are merely obstacles. The team needed to disable the internal alarm system for exactly 90 seconds during the breach. To do this, they needed to bridge the air gap. This is where Yael's proximity became the weapon. She deployed a small, drone-like device, no larger than a hummingbird. It didn't fly, it crawled. She released it onto the roof of the facility. The device scurried into a ventilation shaft, navigating the ducts until it found a server room. The device carried a high-powered RF, radio frequency transmitter. It didn't need to plug into the server. It just needed to be close enough to induce a current in the unshielded wires of the alarm panel. It was a technique known as tempest attacks, reading and injecting signals through electromagnetic emanations. "Drone in position," Yael whispered, injecting the loop. The device began broadcasting a signal that mimicked the all-clear status of the alarm system. It was a digital lie. The sensors on the windows would detect the breach. They would scream a warning to the central computer, but the computer would only hear the drone's soothing lullaby. "Everything is fine. Everything is secure. Loop is active," Yael confirmed. "You have a green light on the windows, 90 seconds before the system resets and detects the anomaly." Avner and his second-in-command, a burly operative named Eitan, moved to the panoramic window of the conference room. The glass was bulletproof, reinforced polycarbonate. You couldn't break it with a hammer. You couldn't shoot through it without alerting the whole mountain range. Eitan pulled out a circular frame with a chemical ring. He stuck it to the glass. He activated a thermal charge. It wasn't an explosion. It was extreme, focused heat. The ring burned through the polymer binding of the glass in seconds, weakening the structural integrity without shattering it. Avner applied a suction cup to the center of the circle and pulled. A perfect disc of bulletproof glass came away silently. The cold mountain air rushed into the warm conference room. Inside, General Vahidi was mid-sentence, pointing at a map of northern Israel. "The defense batteries will be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of..." He stopped. He felt the draft. He turned toward the window. He didn't see a man. He saw the end of his war. The speed of the entry was difficult for the human mind to process. One moment, the room was a secure bunker. The next, it was a battlefield. Avner and Eitan vaulted through the opening. They did not shout, "Freeze!" or "Hands up." This was not a police action. This was a neutralization operation. The rules of engagement were absolute. They carried suppressed submachine guns loaded with subsonic ammunition to minimize the sonic crack. Thwip, 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 thwip. The first two shots took out the personal security officer standing in the corner of the room. He dropped before his hand could reach his holster. The 6 commanders reacted with a mixture of shock and instinct. Colonel Farhadi, the most combat experienced, dove for the table, reaching for a sidearm he kept taped underneath, a paranoid habit that almost saved him. Avner tracked the movement. He didn't aim for the head, he aimed for the center of mass. 2 rounds to the chest, 1 to the pelvis. Farhadi collapsed, overturning the heavy table. Dr. Tehrani froze, his hands raised, his face a mask of terror. In a different mission, he might have been an extraction target, an asset to be kidnapped and interrogated. But the orders tonight were obsidian. No prisoners. The risk of transport was too high. Intelligence had deemed his knowledge too dangerous to remain in play. The team moved with the fluidity of water. They checked corners. They secured the room. Within 8 seconds, all 6 targets were down. The silence returned to the room, broken only by the hum of the projector still displaying the attack plans. "Status," Avner whispered. "Clear," Aiton replied, checking the pulse of General Vahidi. Targets neutralized. Secure the intel. This was the secondary objective. While the bodies were the primary goal, the laptops and documents on the table were a treasure trove. They didn't have time to copy drives. They swept the laptops, the hard copy maps, and the brief phones into Faraday bags, shielded bags that blocked all signals, preventing the devices from being remotely wiped or tracked. Time? Avner asked. 40 seconds left on the alarm loop. Yael's voice came over the comms. Get out, now. They exited the way they came, vaulting back out into the cold night. Aiton placed a small incendiary device on the carpet. It wasn't a bomb to destroy the building. It was a chemical fire starter designed to burn hot and fast, consuming the remaining evidence in the room and creating chaos that would mask their escape. As they reached the generator pad, the alarm loop expired. The facility's system realized that the window was gone. The klaxons erupted. The floodlights shifted. The dormant beast of the compound woke up screaming. The extraction was never going to be easy. The quiet part of the mission was over. Now came the thunder. Guards poured out of the barracks. The Ansar al-Mahdi Corps were disciplined and aggressive. They didn't just fire blindly. They established fields of fire and moved to flank the breach. They're blocking the northern ravine, Yael warned from her vantage point. You have a squad moving to cut off your ascent. We're not going up, Avner said. We're going down. It was a contingency plan. Plan B for breakout. Instead of climbing back up the cliff, which would leave them exposed to fire, they would descend into the valley toward the service road. It was riskier because it brought them closer to the enemy, but it was faster. The team deployed smoke grenades, not standard white smoke, but multispectral smoke that blocked thermal vision. To the guards using night vision scopes, the team simply vanished into a cloud of opaque gray. They ran. The physical conditioning of the Keshet operatives was tested to the limit. They sprinted down loose shale, carrying heavy packs, dodging the sweeping beams of searchlights. Bullets began to snap around them. The guards were firing blindly into the smoke, but the volume of fire was increasing. A heavy machine gun opened up from a watchtower, chewing up the rocks and trees around them. Yael, drop the tower, Avner ordered. On the ridge, Yael lined up her heavy sniper rifle. It was a .50 caliber anti-materiel rifle. She wasn't aiming for the guard. She was aiming for the searchlight and the mounting bracket of the machine gun. Boom. The sound of the heavy rifle echoed through the valley like a thunderclap. The searchlight shattered. The machine gun nest took a direct hit to its shield, sending the gunner ducking for cover. The suppression gave the team the seconds they needed to reach the tree line. They were in the woods now, moving fast. But they were still miles from safety, and the Iranian reaction force was mobilizing. The extraction vehicle, a nondescript cargo van driven by a deep-cover asset named Darius, was waiting at a rendezvous point on the old logging road. But as the team approached, Darius signaled a warning. Checkpoint established, 2 kilometers south. They are locking down the sector. The Iranians were moving faster than anticipated. They had closed the net. The team was trapped inside the perimeter. Avner stopped the team. They were breathing hard, adrenaline flooding their systems. They had the intel. They had completed the objective. But dying here would hand a propaganda victory to the regime. We can't run through a blockade, Aiton said. Not in this van. We don't run through it, Avner said, his mind racing through the contingencies. We become it. It was a desperate gambit. They had uniforms in their packs, IRGC uniforms, part of their disguise kit. They quickly pulled the uniforms over their tactical gear. It wasn't a perfect disguise. Up close, anyone would see the Western boots and the advanced weaponry. But in the dark, amidst the chaos, it might work. They hijacked a military jeep that had been sent to patrol the perimeter roads. The driver was subdued quickly and quietly. Avner took the wheel. They drove toward the checkpoint. This was the most dangerous moment. If the soldiers at the roadblock asked for a countersign, they were dead. Avner flashed the headlights, an aggressive, authoritative signal. He leaned out the window, screaming in Farsi, mimicking the panic and anger of a commander chasing saboteurs. They went west. They went toward the village. Move your vehicles. We need to pursue. The psychology of the moment was crucial. In a crisis, lower-ranking soldiers look for authority. They look for someone who knows what is happening. Avner provided that authority. The soldiers at the checkpoint hesitated. They saw the uniform, the jeep, the urgency. They didn't check IDs. They pulled the barrier aside. "Go! Go! Catch them!" the checkpoint commander shouted. Avner floored the accelerator. The jeep roared past the guards. As they cleared the barricade, one of the soldiers noticed the suppressed weapons in the back seat. Weapons that were not standard issue. He raised his rifle. "Stop." Too late. The jeep disappeared around the bend. The soldiers opened fire, red tracers streaking into the night, but they were chasing ghosts. They ditched the jeep 5 miles later, torching it to destroy DNA evidence. They met Darius and the van in a dry riverbed. The team piled into the back, hidden under a false floor beneath crates of pomegranates. The drive back to Tehran was tense. Every police siren made their hearts stop. Every pothole felt like an IED. They reached the safe house in the southern suburbs at 04 Eularu. It was supposed to be a secure location where they could rest and prepare for exfiltration out of the country. But as they approached, Yael's scanner picked up a signal. "Active surveillance," she whispered. "I'm picking up localized radio traffic on the frequency used by VVAC, Iranian intelligence." The safe house was burned. Somehow the regime had flagged it. If they went in, they would be ambushed. They were in the capital of a hostile nation, carrying the most sensitive intelligence in the world, with 6 dead commanders behind them and nowhere to hide. "New plan," Avner said. "We don't hide. We leave, now." "The borders are closed," Darius said. "Airports are on lockdown." "We're not taking a plane," Avner replied. "We're taking the scenic route." The team drove to an industrial park near the railway lines. Mossad had a dormant asset there, a shipping container that had been sitting in a yard for 3 months, marked for export to Azerbaijan. The container was not empty. It was a Trojan horse. Inside, hidden behind a wall of cheap furniture, was a life support module. It had oxygen scrubbers, water, and padded bunks. It was designed to smuggle high-value defectors out of the country. Today, it would smuggle the team. They broke the seal, loaded themselves and the intelligence inside, and resealed it from the interior using a specialized welding rig. They sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of the outside world. The crane lifting the container, the slam of it landing on a train car, the chug of the locomotive engine. For 24 hours, they were cargo. They traveled north, toward the border crossing at Astara. The heat inside the container was stifling. The oxygen scrubbers hummed. They couldn't speak. They couldn't move. They just had to trust that the paperwork, forged months ago, would hold up. At the border, the train stopped. They heard voices, customs inspectors, dogs barking. A dog scratched at the side of the container. A guard shouted something. The team inside readied their weapons. If the door opened, it would be a close-quarters firefight in a metal box. They heard the clang of a hammer testing the metal. Then, silence. "Clear!" a voice shouted outside. The train lurched forward. They crossed the bridge over the Astara River. They were in Azerbaijan. They were out. Back in Tehran, the sunrise revealed the magnitude of the disaster. The Alborz compound was a smoking ruin. Fire crews were still dousing the flames in the conference room. When the bodies were identified, the shockwave hit the Supreme Leader's office. It wasn't just the loss of life. It was the precision. 6 commanders, the heads of the missile program, the nuclear liaison, the external operations chiefs, all gone. The regime was paralyzed. Who could they trust? How did the Israelis know? Who was the mole? Paranoia is a weapon. The immediate result was a purge. The IRGC began arresting its own officers, suspecting betrayal. The offensive that had been planned was canceled. The command structure was shattered. Communications were shut down as everyone scrambled to change codes and safe houses. The stunned reaction wasn't just about grief, it was about capability. The Iranians realized that their most secure facility was not secure. Their most secret meeting was not secret. The psychological impact was devastating. It set their operational planning back by years. In the West, intelligence agencies watched the satellite photos of the burned compound and the sudden radio silence from Tehran with knowing nods. The CIA director reportedly sent a single-word message to his Israeli counterpart: "Clean." 2 days later, the team was back in Tel Aviv. They sat in a debriefing room, unshaven, exhausted, smelling of sweat and industrial grease. The stolen laptops were being decrypted. The initial yield was staggering: maps of missile silos, names of sleeper agents in Europe, bank account numbers for terror financing. The operation had paid for itself 1,000 times over. Avner walked out of the briefing and stood on the balcony overlooking the Mediterranean. The city was bustling. People were drinking coffee, rushing to work, complaining about traffic. They had no idea how close they had come to a war. They had no idea that 6 men in a mountain fortress had planned to rain fire on them that very week, and they would never know. That was the burden of the job. The victories were silent. He lit a cigarette, his hand shaking slightly for the first time in 3 days. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the cold reality of what they had done. They had eliminated 6 human beings. Enemies, yes. Dangerous men, yes. But men. He looked at the horizon where the sea met the sky. The operation was over. The obsidian night had passed. The sun was up. But Avner knew that in the shadow war, the sun never truly rises. There is only the waiting for the next night. The unit disbanded, returning to their cover lives, waiting for the next signal, the next song on the radio, the next impossible mission. Because the list was never empty.